Hi everyone. Welcome to an episode called I Was Wondering, hosted by yours truly, D-Dubs. It's a sister one, yeah, Red Couch. I know a lot of people have been asking me about Red Couch. I've been doing podcasts, hence the glasses. But anyway, so with me today I have MissDee Mat'seliso, right? And then MissDee and Mat'seliso as our guests. Today the topic is going to be towards colonialism and decolonizing and whatnots, all that topics and whatnots. Like history, historical culture, and how what you call. So MissDee called me for us to have this conversation because she had concerns that she wanted to address to Lesotho especially. So first of all, before we go anywhere, I'd like to know now what you guys do. We should tell the people what you guys do. MissDee, where it's in.
I feel like I should respect MissDee and she
MissDee,
should go
yes,
first.
you understand?
Because first she used to be my teacher, okay? So it's like that dynamic needs to be maintained.
All right, dear Mat'seliso, what do I not do? Let's start there. Oh, I'm a theatre practitioner. I'm an arts education advocate. I'm a cultural advocate in my own right. All things to do with decolonization, I'm greatly invested in, and anything else in between. I'm a translator. I'm a farmer, communication specialist. Many things. So I'll just leave it right there for now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a thing. Every time someone asks me what do I do, I'm like,
Exactly.
Har.
It's hard. You feel like you need to cram your entire life's work
exactly.
into like
Blinding and it's a 5.
And a facilitator.
Hey.
But you see, that's nice because it can be all encompassing. I am a historian in the making, and I'm being modest by saying in the making because I feel like there are other historians who've been in the game for so long and I'm still relatively new in my academic career. But I'm a historian, I'm a researcher, I am an aspiring curator. And please, but in the art space, don't come for me because you know. But this is what I do. I'm a researcher and I'm a writer. I am a history buff, really, and I work to, aside from my academic work, I work to sort of find a way to integrate the discourses happening in my research and in the academic space, integrate that into everyday life and everyday conversations, because I've really noticed an unfortunate gap, an elitist gap in academic practice where we don't necessarily consider who the research is for or who the work that we're writing is going to be received by. So that's my contribution to the decolonial space or the decolonial conversation, which is happening across the board, you know, whether you're in the arts or you're in academia or you're in the heritage and conservation space. I mean, this is where it's at because it's time for us to take our ish back, you know?
Okay, so as we do this, we are beginning. MissDee is here, MissDee is here to help me talk to understand what she says. I needed someone to decode and whatnot, because if I was the only one, I'd just be on something. So, okay. The second bit, what? You understand?
I'm caught between feeling flattered and feeling really embarrassed because I feel like
when I told MissDee what we're doing today and I mentioned your name, she's like, "What? She was my student."
Yes.
There was a name for me that. We paused right there. So,
but I got you still.
Yeah, thank you. So today we are here because of your concerns. What you actually want to get off your chest. You understand? probably summed up or in detail, I could say, because then that's when now we can have this conversation again.
Okay, so first, thank you so much for, for sort of taking what I have to say and making it the main thing, for allowing me to make use of your platform. But I think I'll start by saying this. In reading in my academic career since high school, and being a history buff and being an arts buff, and kind of trying to navigate where those two meet and how they can help us to reconcile with ourselves and our identities as Basotho, it has dawned on me that there are institutions, colonial institutions, put in place that are still thriving, that are still very strong. And because Basotho genale a strong culture of hufua, right? I feel like we're not privy enough to how detrimental that can be to the decolonial project as a whole. And I say this because these institutions that I'm speaking of, give the university, give the museum, give muso, give the media, right? And they have the money, and they are in a position to play on that when it comes to the kelello tsa bana ba Basotho le mesebetsi ya rona, right? Whether it's our art or our research, they know how important it is in the quest to fetch ourselves from the clutches of colonialism. And these institutions play on that, in that it kind of feels like they make us do the work only for them to buy it from us. And so essentially the colonial wheel keeps spinning, right? And just because 1966 happened and we got our independence, people kind of forget that white supremacy is still rife in our culture, in our communities, in our politics, and all kinds of engagements. And so that's something that I have been aware of, but my eyes have been opened to it even more in the work that I'm currently doing.
What sparked the footage?
What? I've been
real.
That's too
I mean, I reached a footage moment where I've shared this anecdote with literally everyone. I'm just like, this happened. But I think, okay, I'll sum it up to say this. There is a project that I was roped into as a researcher and an amateur archivist. The said project is on a photographic collection, Ntate Mohlwe wa Ramakatane, who I would be remiss not to give a huge shout out to, because his life and his work and his career have been a stepping stone for my own career, and has been a window into how nuanced Basotho's history is. But anyway, I digress. So the work I've been involved in was on a project to, oh man, this is a tell-all. I don't know who is gonna watch this thing.
Hopefully everybody.
I was part of a project who digitized our archive high as an effort by the stakeholders or the institutions behind the upcoming Lesotho National Museum. And for those who are not aware, our country doesn't have a particularly developed infrastructure when it comes to cultural work and cultural conservation and that kind of thing. And so there were consultants brought on to oversee the entire process, but that project as well in particular. And in that process, I was excited that Mosebetsi Wananang is finally going to get the publicity and the attention it deserves, because Ntate Ramakatane was such an incredible photographer, and he was so instrumental in sort of creating a visual narrative for us, you know, and his photographs not only serve as illustrations of our history, but I think that they can be used as a social tool to help us reconcile with ourselves. So I was very excited when, you know, I saw the excitement around his work, and I particularly, now I'm using his photographs as my main source for my PhD studies. But I was incidentally then sort of roped into this project, and I appreciated it so much because it helped. It was an opportunity to develop skills that I've always wanted to develop, but I didn't know where to find. So I'm eternally grateful for that. But even amidst that gratitude, I was able to see the potential for exploitation that could happen at the hands of these institutions. The potential for this visual history to be swayed to serve a narrative that is not authentic to the Mosotho experience. And it pained me to see Horena, how much power these institutions actually have, right? In terms of access, you know, just by virtue of the fact that Project Dena was not digitized ka tjhelete ya Basotho, means that there is some copyright loopholes to how these photographs can be used and by which institutions, right? And that means it's also susceptible to a lot of gatekeeping.
Ownership,
Hey, you know, so obviously, but no, we're just the custodians. We're just keeping this archive for Ntate Ramakatane. We're just helping to preserve it, and it's even labeled as an endangered archive. So it's basically these people saying we came and we saved this.
Yeah,
This Mosotho photographer did not understand how important his work is, and and his family and himself are going to get money out of it for years and years to come, right? But the truth is, such institutions do not have a good history when it comes to how they handle our work and for what purpose, or, you know, and how much do they stand to gain in comparison to us. You know, obviously I don't know the details about, you know, the contracts and the copyright laws. I'm not privy to things like that, you know, but I just as a researcher and somebody who I is passionate about helping to decolonize our history and our, you know, I saw it happen, and I saw that it's going to continue happening, and I felt like I would be remiss not to make use of my voice to open people's eyes. Just to sort of sum that up, as an educated young Black woman, we are great in many ways, but we're also prone to being used as pawns in this chess game. And what made me angry is, after completing the work, in hindsight, seeing that I was that pawn. You know, I was that pawn because I facilitated this archive being fetched. I facilitated the relationship that was being formed between Ntate Moholo Ramakatane le batho banana. You know, and of course there were other Basotho involved. It wasn't just me. But towards the end, how this archive could be used once it was digitized, it dawned on me that because you're educated, because you're Black, because you speak how they need you to speak, because you understand what they need you to understand in order to get the work done, you can be used as a pawn in basically giving away another piece of our history. you know, and because there's a socio-economic element to it, I need to eat, right? I need to be paid. They play on that. They know that I need to eat. I'm a student. I'm a full-time PhD student. So if I have the opportunity to do some consultancy work and to get some money in while also networking and this and this and this, of course I'll take that opportunity, right? So I feel like I'm not the only one that this has ever happened to, and it's going to keep happening. But bonyane ha mahlo a rona a buleile hore na ho ntse etsalang, we're able to play the long game in this decolonial project, you know, because the truth is colonization was built on the backs of Black people, you know, but for centuries. And it's not an institution that you can break down with just one sitting or just one moment of outrage. You have to play that long game, which means you have to understand what they're playing at, you know. And yeah.
That was
I mean, I totally agree with you. And like real life examples that I can provide in support of the idea that we are used their project, you know. At the same time, what I've come to learn through experience is that for Haemu, people will not teach you what they don't know. In fact, I think this is a universal thing. I will not teach you what I don't know. You know, if hakia hudiswa to see what colonial projects ki hudisitswe fela ho tseba hore ha kere batho ba itseng ba hlanka eka ba tlo re fa tšhelete ho etsa project e itseng and re tlameha re etse. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And it's such it's a sad situation hore bening in taba ya mofuta o ntse tswela pele. At the same time, it opened some things an opportunity for it to start happening. So I think you would not feel this passionate or be this passionate about Tabayena had you not had you not been given the opportunity, one, to be in it, but also had you also not been educated and given the tools to be able to see some of these things.
It would just be another day.
Exactly. So I think what's happening really muso kapa some of the people who are in these strategic places for the most part habana awareness ya botibo ba all of this, you know. Rona re bona fela basadi taba tsa nteta ka makatane isale di o sena motho a di etsang a ka nnete ha ba ne monyetla hore re di etse o teng ha re o nke, you know, tsa hore na kankane ho etsala jwang. Unfortunately, those conversations are not happening where they're supposed to be happening.
And you know, just to sort of add to what MissDee said, in the few private conversations that I've tried to have with people that I would imagine would be as outraged as I am, I've gotten a general sort of apathy, you know, a kind of you know, it's a big project and it's beyond us. And I refuse to, you know, shrink myself to the point where I'm saying these are international universities. This is a government ministry. Who am I? Who am I? You know, I am a voice for my people. I am more than enough. You know, I'm more than enough of a voice to stand in front of these people and say what you are doing is a mess. Right?
I think that comes into that's sort of like a reality check emblem. House Namota Afananka Lintzilo, they'll still feel
exactly.
She apparently did, I just learned recently, she did a lot of theatrical projects, and she's decided because she felt away with her works, and it doesn't it deserves more than what's been offered.
Yeah.
So I don't know about them,
Yeah.
but a lot of people never can they know about them. So she said, nah, it's fine. Now I'll sit on it. My kids will make a plan. I'll educate them enough to, you understand the value of what I have.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, and I don't know if as Basotho we generally don't have a contemporary way of learning our history and engaging with it, or if we're just not interested. And I refuse to believe that we're not interested, because I've met plenty of people that are interested in our heritage and our history and our culture, but it's unfortunate that we don't take enough time to look back to see that these things have happened before, and before that, and before that, and before that. Example ka Date Thomas Mofolo and his literature. I mean, that man's chaka alone, that novel alone, has garnered so much attention and so much profit, right? But from my understanding and from the conversations that I've had with people who are in the literature space, and there's copyright issues, but the paperwork that his family members were made to sign was tight. It was tight. So they will not get anything beyond that one lump sum that they were given 30 years ago or 40 years ago or whenever that is. And that's going to keep happening because there's a socio-economic crisis that we are faced with as Black people, right? That colonialism has made, continues to ensure it's difficult to come out of. And the only way you can come out of it is through the very people that oppressed you. So how do you trust that, you actually are being freed? You take the chains off and you put something else on me, to like some kind of tracker monitor thing. It's just colonialism packaged different,
I have a question, MissDee. I always, when I have conversations with friends, when we talk about such things, I always have this thing, I don't know any other race or Batho who are as patient as Maho, I'm talking Europeans, like the colonizers, not white people. But they are very patient in the sense they do a piece and they let it grow, manifest its value. But also sort of we're given that thing, you do artwork, how quick to sell. How much is it? I can buy. You need energy. Right. You understand? I'm gonna take that piece of art and put it in my house and increase in value. My kids will sell it, or their kids, and by that time, it's a little 25 malut. Right now, it's worth 2.5 malut. 2 generations after. We are not. I don't think we have that thing instilled in us. Right or wrong, I don't know.
I don't think you're wrong.
Okay.
But in the defense of our people, I think it's important to understand that a lot of these institutions and these structures are foreign to us.
Yes.
Right? So it's not to say that we don't see the value in our art or in our crafts or in our writing. It's that value surpasses money to us.
Yes. Yeah.
It's our history, it's our heritage, it's generational knowledge and wealth, right? And so it kind of translates into us not being economically savvy, but that's because that manner of making wealth is I feel like
to us.
It's not us.
It's not ours.
It's not us. And I really believe there are pieces of art and I'm not particularly speaking of artists that are contemporary, that are in the now. The art space and the humanities space and the creative space has definitely grown through the years, to a point where it's no longer surprising to be able to make a career out of it. But before then, these were forms of expression, these were forms of self-documentation, you know. And so, like I'm saying, they served, I feel like they served a much greater purpose than the economic. And that's why it may seem as though our elders or our ancestors allowed themselves to be robbed, but it's because to them they were creating from a place of richness, of spiritual richness, cultural richness. And I don't think they ke nahana ho bona e ne le ntho e mona hore ho na le a saying ya Sesotho hore moriana ha o lebuwe, right? And I feel like a lot of these things that we created were a form of expression that we could not put monetary value to, you know. Like hona tjena ha ke ya ho nkgono wa ka a luile moseme mo a ke ngwana ka e re ke etsetse ngata ke etsetse 50 tlolo di rekisa masere o tlo re nka, you know, like go start a family, and this will be where you make memories with your child and your husband, and you understand. So I think that there's that sense of posterity behind it that we have, and a more, I don't know, like a deeper meaning that we ascribe to the work, and that unfortunately doesn't make it easy for us to navigate the now.
And I also feel like on that point, certain things are foreign to us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, time has pushed us into a space where we now have to monetize everything.
Yeah.
And
even marriage.
Exactly. Right. And how some monetize it? I could say, you are no longer with the soul of the time.
You're left behind.
Exactly. I mean, look at ditaba tsa rona re le Basotho, for example. You know, these are things still. How somebody can take a beautiful picture, it goes and sells. You know, ke hopola hona le thaba e nngwe uthweng ke bitso lebe. You know, thaba tse ngata tsa hae kwana ka utlwa eke mabitso a tsena bo bitso lebe bo Mathebe. You know, and if you actually get the real names tsa ditaba tsena, you know, there's quite some anatomical representation.
Yeah.
And a monetary value, right? But I bet you, if hokabali muthu a hlahang kae, yana le the ability to monetize yona taba eo. How fingane? Utla ho so uthwi. Hona le a monetary value attached to dintho tsena tsa rona. And because itlabele motho e mong a tlanka dithuli tsa hae le ditsebo tsa hae, you know, and most of the time because we are also remember we're still playing catch up.
Yes,
for the most
there's a lot
part
to learn.
we're playing catch up.
And most of the time it comes in less self-interest.
We're playing catch up with the modern world, and hangata we are not aware of playing catch up, or it means, okay, if you're trying to catch up with me, it means you will set the standard, right? So you are now forced to say to the standard to say no, not realizing by so saying or by so doing, you are robbing the value yantwena intrinsically. So I mean, I think what's said about all of these things, in whatever spaces one can identify them, who are the tools you know, we are constantly playing catch up, and I don't know we are modernizing, but we're not necessarily playing catch up.
You know, MissDee,
I hear what you're saying.
As you're speaking, I think that is one of the veins of what decolonization is that it needs to be a blend between keeping up with the times and returning to the old. Right?
I was gonna say that.
We need to strike that balance. And it's important to strike that balance because unfortunately we cannot erase the past. We have a colonial history. And therefore, a lot of what our modern day identity is based off of is colonialism. It's religion. It's the way of the white man ya ho apara. It's the way ya bona ya ho ngola. You know, like it's penetrated, it's pervasive colonialism. It penetrates every aspect of our lives, you know. And so decolonization, I feel, is not necessarily to say we are erasing this, because we cannot. It's such an old system, and it's so nuanced and nitty piece, see, like it's in everything. But what we can do is try to understand it as much as possible, as rigorously as possible, so that we can be able to call BS where BS is happening.
Kinale,
You know,
the thing is, it's not like we're not exposed. I feel there's Kinale bana ba ileng dikolong naheng tsona tse, and they see how these people treat their own history. When they come back to Lesotho, why don't they implement the same?
but
You understand?
how?
Balance out, like I'm saying, you're going, you learn, you institutionalize yourself that side. So it's about high. So you're doing the catch up for us.
But here's the thing, then comes the economic element. Right?
Okay.
Ke brain drain, and it'll always be there, because nkeka kena skolo, ke kenya batswadi ba ka in debt for 10 years. I'm in tertiary, and then I come here, and then I have to navigate a poor government or governance system, a poor or non-existent cultural conservation and history system, a poor academic system. It's because I'm doing it for my people. You know, as individuals, we need to be able to strike a balance. I need to eat. I have a family to feed, and I'm not the only one. I have aspirations as well, you know. So there's all those things to consider, you know. And because I know a lot of professionals in this, whether it's in theater or art or you know, whatever it may be, that if they just came back home, right, and they were able to be like sort of secure in the fact that they'll be fed and honed, man. But also a thing with a thing that I've noted, and you know, I stand to be corrected. I know that there are people that may disagree with me, but I feel like a majority of people will agree, is that I don't know if the nature of our colonialism has kind of been palatable enough for us to let things slide. It's not as extreme as apartheid and segregation, right? So it kind of feels like collectively we're not really bubbling under enough, because if we were, we wouldn't be afraid to take the risks. We wouldn't be afraid to say F American money, F NGO money, F relapa, you know, throw all your toys. We don't do that. You know what I mean?
You are an
And I'm not imploring anybody to do that, but I'm saying that the reason the decolonial project seems to be moving so much slower in our country is because there's a level of,
you're reminding me, TD, of a conversation I was having yesterday. How we're not fired up enough. A conversation I was having yesterday with some friends of mine, and it was about feminism, let me put it that way. And I'm finding it, I think it's strategic that I mentioned this, because you know, decolonial spaces would hang out at the issue of feminism also
always comes up.
It always comes up. So Maubani, I always have rather different thoughts from other people. So Maubani, I'm having a conversation with some people. You know what? My place is in the kitchen. Personally,
I want to be there.
I love the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's my place, you know. In fact,
Let me do what I need.
And feminism, as you know, I tend not to categorize myself under that I'm just a woman.
Yeah.
But feminism, it gives women a choice. Good, I want to harness all that and say my choice is to be
a woman.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I feel like most of the time the language of liberation and the language of decolonization is so foreign.
Yes.
So, we can talk about colonization from here to there. But if now we are going to, and I'm going to use this because I'm passionate about this. If now we're going to say culture of Lesotho is a rape culture, I'm sorry. What?
I've heard that
What?
before. Yeah.
Like what are you saying? First of all, you're using a white man's language now to
categorize my people and to
agenda tse ding. So ha ile ho bua nnete nna ke le Mosotho rather how no can tlhalosetsa di agenda tsena in a way that speaks to my lived reality and experiences, then maybe re ne re tla kgona ho re etse more. And you will be a decolonial advocate within the academic space. You get what I'm saying? If we there's somebody or who decoder this language. For science to understand, then but really decolonization, maybe one of the reasons why is perhaps scholars and we need to also find a different language, find ways of decoding
the language that exists.
Coming to my next point. It's not a point, but it's a break. We're going to a break. We talked about the concerns. We're going to talk about solutions, suggested solutions. What I might think might be a solution. What Mat'seliso might think is a solution. What MissDee might think is a solution. We'll be back. Shout out to Rockview. Shout out to, the Red Couch. Shout out to, I was wondering. Let it out.
With the heat.
He's rolling. Okay. And we're back on our podcast. In I was wondering. We have, just a reminder, we have MissDee, we have MissDee in the building. We're talking about, it's a whole decolonization pandemic type of situation for today. So a lot has been said in the background, behind the scenes. So I guess I like, but anyway, the concern. What we are lacking and the possible guy. So I would like to hear from you guys, like suggestive solutions, you understand, to, because I think you mentioned it hanyanyana, like striking a balance, catch up, where you're from type of vibe. So on a practical scenario, more practical, not theoretical, what would be a step forward for these kind of mishaps and lack of self-acknowledgement on a marginal scale? Is it that's a tough question, or where do I begin?
Let me start so that one exposure being exposed to different cultures, being exposed to just different ways of thinking. Not only that, but having an education system that enabled me to develop independent thought, independent thinking skills. Now, one of the things
Yeah.
Ka le mahoho. E re ha ke bona dintho nke ke nahane pele,
Yeah.
what does this mean? Ha ke utlwa ke le uncomfortable about a certain issue or certain things not gelling, I should take time to interrogate that.
Yes.
I should take time to validate the fact that I'm uncomfortable with this. And once I validate it, interrogate it, then the rest will
Understand
follow.
it,
And
yeah.
understand it, the rest will follow. I think there's so many things going on. Tse etsang jwang? Tse etsang hore batho ba qetelle ba sa kgone ho itlhalosa, to acknowledge the discomfort that's going on. And I mean, you're talking about solutions, Ndaba. I honestly don't think we cannot talk about solutions without letting this play itself out.
Yeah.
You know, e ke ka hona jwale ha ke utlwe bohloko ya baneng ha o ntumelle hore ke lle. Ebe hore manyo ha re tswele pele solution ke tsena. You have to let me cry because
yeah.
even in the crying there's knowledge that I'm going to gain. There's a process. And ke ntse ke dumela hore we have to let certain things play themselves out. Ke rata nthona hore scholarship is coming through.
Yeah.
We have young people who are passionate about these things. You know, let's get those people who are within the systems who have a light. Let's amplify those voices. I believe one of the solutions, you know, while enabling people to cry and to enable to let this thing play itself out, but also let's empower the people. You know, Mat'seliso, for example.
We're on. Okay, so I like what MissDee said. Ka hore tuto e re fumanang, or the exposure that we get can be an important determining factor in how we navigate these complexities. And ke dumela hore that exposure doesn't necessarily have to be you getting on a plane and leaving the country. It has more to do with being able to look at what is in place in your own country, a magnifying glass, like really look deeper at what's going on. You know, you can expose yourself by what exposure does is that it puts you in a place where you have more liberty to choose how you think, what you think. And it also puts you in a position to be able to call BS on said system, right? So that exposure, whether it's through education or interacting with people from other cultures, or whether it's from being burnt by that system, that can be exposure, you know, on its own. We need to be able to harness that pain and the things that we're seeing, and also not be afraid to lose what we know from being exposed. There is a culture amongst us of being afraid of the unknown, you know. So it's like if ke honabale ha ndaba atla age kereke tsena tsa lona le religion ya lona e fihlile ka makgo, it's important for ndaba not to clam up as a Christian man. It's important for him to say, oh, that's what you think? Okay, what is it about this religious system or whatever, this governance system, democracy, that you feel like doesn't work for us? You know, like I feel like it needs to start with us. I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know if we're afraid of Hositibi or afraid of the reality that the lives that we have been living for the last couple of decades have been lives of suppression, of intellectual and spiritual and cultural suppression. And if we're able to sort of engage with that reality without if I lose all of this that I know, what do I have left? Then we are in a better position to rise from that. I feel we really are afraid to we're afraid to burn things because we're not sure if we'll be able to rise from those ashes. You know what I mean?
Very much.
Hey.
I have conversations with people, but I'm so straight and I don't care what they think. Hangat. I always say Lesotho Monana is where it is because it's never experienced struggle. You understand? It's never all the countries that you see rising up, that are risen up and whatnot, have gone through some form of massacre. You understand? America is where it is because of the civil war. The Americans, the British type of vibe. The British had their own history. South Africa had apartheid. People saw naha pele ho bophelo ba bona. Lesotho monana, like Zimbabwe is still going through that process. You understand? They went through a guerrilla warfare, but still they understand what they have and they don't sell it short. Hence bahanang hama again. You get my point? I've always said we need, for us to be in that level of thinking, I don't mind losing this for the greater good. It has to be sparked by something. Like a youth walk, and then bacha whatnot, and then bacha they were like really wash up like my ponisa, and then what? You get my point? There's that thing out there, like a holistic footing.
You know, Daba, what I'll say about that is I used to be somebody who believed very much in a revolution that looks like anarchy. You know, I was like, burn all this shit, burn all of it, right? And sorry, I'm not saying that I'm no longer of that opinion. We were on the subject of you feeling like we need a revolution, basically, for things to change. And I was saying to you that I agree with that stance to a very large degree, but I also don't feel like colonialism as a system, how nuanced and intrinsic it is and how pervasive it is. I don't think that physical struggle is the only way. I think it is part of that picture, but it doesn't have to be the only picture. In every liberation struggle, you've had your intellectuals, you've had your artists who make use of their skills or their platforms to resist the dominating system, right? You had your Steve Bikos and your Robert Sobukwe as intellectuals in South African liberation struggle. You had photographers.
Excluded Mandela there for a second, but it's cool. It's cool. We know why. But you had your artists. You know, you had movements and photography groups, especially in the 1980s, Afropics, which was a collective of photographers that basically decided to make intentional use of their medium as a means of resistance. I say all this to say that, can we maybe not look at the countries in our periphery and learn from them and find a different approach? Our experience of white supremacy and racism and colonialism does not look like your standard colonial story, right? So, we can't necessarily be part of the fallist movement. Which statues are we going to ask to fall? There are no statues here. But you know what we do have? Churches. Yeah.
And I'm not saying the churches should fall, but those are the physical monuments that represent our colonial past. Why are we not having conversations around how to decolonize that space? What the role of these institutions, the church, the religion was, right? It may be coincidental, but I believe that Lesotho being a protectorate and also being a nation of highly literate people puts us in a position where our role in the decolonial project is more intellectual and creative than it is for many other countries, because we don't have a person to point. We don't have a Van Riebeck to point to.
Yeah.
Those guys are all gone. They did their damage, they planted their seed, and they left. What they've left us with is, I feel, is a more it's a kind of colonialism that is harder to unlearn, because it has become us. It has become ingrained in how we identify ourselves as human beings. And so I feel like we really need to dig deeper than I'm taking to the streets and striking. Who are you striking against? Are you striking against our prime minister, who you know Mo Dutsing Ole Monlwena is a victim or a result of the same colonial system that you are striking against? Do you understand what I'm saying? So I really do believe that we need to look at resistance as something that is much bigger than mohwanto. Resistance has to be your everyday. Resistance has to be how you live your life against the grain of what capitalism and colonialism have set to be the standard. Yeah.
I want to chip in with something. And apparently that horse died. Basically what it means is, young people are so energetic that we want to, create things where they can, but for example, and I think as we must also have a 3D vision of where we are, the systems we're working with, and our parents, for example, are of the old system, right? And who have their hearts and minds in the right place. And most of these of batsadi ba rona or batho ba baholo, they are sitting in places more support. What is happening right now, which is really unfortunate, is that we have young people and we're speaking a different language. And we're speaking a different language. And how language whoa, and I think for the most part, and I'm saying this because on a few occasions, just with everything and things that you people or everybody has learned, how atamela ntho e itseng o tlameha o ithute language ya yona pele what ntho e ithutile sekolong how fitla fielding, two different playing fields. And I think one of the things we forget to do as young, very passionate and energetic people is we forget to take time to learn our environment. The environment is young people about our school but these young people, the first thing they want is money. There are so many things happening on the ground, and I think we have this militaristic approach. TV because Black Lives Matter, roads must fall. Distraction, and every time how some issues go and I think the solution really these
they receive so better.
Willing
They're
to
so willing,
help.
yeah.
They are really so willing. And they're willing to learn. But hangata, re ba approacha ka dikelello and then eno ke engwe dintho tse tla re sitisa go fitlhela mane, you know. So we you know, yes, we've got the ideas, but we also need to learn the language. We have to understand the culture and the dynamics of these things we're working towards. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. You know, you cannot go. There are so many issues. They're not willing to accept. I mean, I want to talk about the issue of you know, homosexuality and the spectrum of sexuality. Listen, now ntate moholo wa ka ang hodisitseng a entseng jena o gotse aba monna go na le monna le mosadi jwale nna ke le motho a motjha ke se ke feka Granddad,
I have a right.
Like, I have a right. This is so outdated. Why can't you accept that this is what it is? It's not going to happen like that.
You know, and I think just to add to what MissDee is saying, I think it's very important for us not to just approach our elders with that compassion, but to also give them the benefit of the fact that ha se hore ha bana dikelello, ha se hore ha ba kgone ho inahana ka tsela e wena o inahanang. And one thing that being a history practitioner has taught me is that there are a lot of things that we think we are teaching our elders that have been there but don't have the terminology that we have. Ke tla etsa mohlala ka archive ena ya dinepe ya ntate Ramakatane ntse ke sebetsa ka yona. That archive is profound because it challenges the concept of femininity and masculinity, the concept of lerato, the affection that have become part of our identity to a point more lies. You understand what I'm saying? Monna Mosotho a ke a bontsha affection ho ngwana bo kapo ho abutua hae in the manner of touching. Lies. Those photographs exist where these people were not trying to filter themselves based on the archetype. It's a colonialism. They were just being. And in so being, they challenged every single principle of colonialism that you can think of. Concepts of love, concepts of monogamy, concepts of, you know, like the nuclear family. You see that in that photographic archive alone. How many other photographic archives, how many journals and manuscripts are sitting in people's houses and boxes where you are certain they challenged those things? You know, things like practices like polygamy. If you want to look at polygamy and polygamy from a decolonial perspective, then you'll come to understand that it had far less to do with the masculine figure than we ascribe to it. Okay? Because in a polygamist relationship, you are outnumbered. Like, let's just, you know, and there are domestic sort of issues that or domestic practices that need to be undertaken to maintain a household, to maintain leloko. And I feel like our ancestors were privy of those things. And that's why things like polygamy existed. But you have to understand that these systems existed. Part of them were wiped out, and then aspects of them that weren't wiped out, what's colonialism into it. So now you're going to look at polygamy from a white supremacist patriarchal perspective. And it will look like, hi man, who unequally ibile Basotho khale ba etsa ba le patriarchal. How true is that really? If you look at the concept of polygamy outside of presidency colonialism has set. What was the point hore Monena must get all the women he wants? You know?
Yeah,
and then do what with them? And then do what with them? Because then there's also the aspect of you need to feed us, you need to make us all babies, you know? And it's like, are you in a position to do that? You know? And so I think, like, just to add on to what MissDee is saying, when we are engaging in the discourse on decolonialism, I think that we need to give enough credit to our elders to say, but their manner of thinking, our indigenous knowledge systems have been diluted by something else. And so there's a hybrid rhetoric that's coming out and it's muffled. It's weird. Look, now we're struggling to reconcile with it because we're like, no man, this does not make sense. You know, and it also doesn't make sense. We see our mothers, for example, they're matriarchs in our families as Basotho, and you see how strong they are, how opinionated they are, and it's difficult to reconcile. To system, you know, and she did not see any benefit to herself, or she had no power, or she had no agency. It is not true, you know. And I'll just add one more thing. Because MissDee spoke a little bit on feminism and you know, I think the way that we conceive of masculine and feminine is very much colonial. But culture, and I don't want to believe that it's true. Even in the way that women's bodies are policed on how we can dress and undress, how we can express ourselves or not express ourselves. A lot of people will say, and I get that. I get it. But again, reference to this photographic archive, there were women who frequented this man's studio in the late 60s, early 70s, and they went there and they took their clothes off and they said, take pictures of me like this, because this is what I want my husband to go see. Okay? You cannot tell me that that is the voice of someone who has no agency, who has no understanding of like the power that she has. Only agency. If she was being photographed by a white photographer, and she was able to appeal to him and say, my loved one, right, Mohatsaka is out there working for me and my family to eat. I miss my person. You know, I love my person. I want them to remember me. I want to look good for them. So you will take these pictures of me in this bikini. And my underwear or whatever it may be. But it's not on us. Like, it's not on our forefathers. They were patriarchal and it's the makings of colonialism. Ndate Ramakatane did not had Kaba Atibela Basadi Bano from his studio to say this is indecent, or to say Jale, you are, you know. Yeah, no. No, he understood that because there was a level of respect and just a sort of authentic non-colonial perspective on aspects like issues like love and work and separation and family, you know. So as we are kind of trying to join the rest of the continent on this discourse, decolonialism, we need to open up our hearts to understanding that we have as much to teach as we do to learn.
Anything you want to say, MissDee, before we do the things that things happen?
I'm just always so happy to be part of this conversation, Obane. It's so big, but I also think that's what the decolonial project, if you will, small steps. You know, so you know, financially, I find that the manner in which, for example, how the Prime Minister on social media, like I can so I do think that and what's a hulu molding?
Okay. On a point in you, there was a prime minister at the time. He's always been like a grandfather figure to me. I grew up with a grandson. Maybe one of our friends, Umubita China, on Facebook. All of us, we were like, yo, dog, wait, hey, man, what's going on? And then he's like, no, we barely positioning Yabo Prime Minister. He's now a public figure. We will treat him as such. And we're like, no, dog. We're now the grandson. You get my point? We don't do that.
You don't
Hey,
do that.
you understand? And then he took it like, And Lena, his dad had a controversial thing going on. He was a judge, like this was and whatnot. Some people might pick what I'm talking about actually, because it was a big thing. And we're like, you've never heard us like that. Because this is a public figure.
Yeah.
Let's not start this manga business, because that's where now we detach each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's more, all of a sudden, because of that small little thing, it's a more highland thing.
Sure.
Let's not support this.
And I think just to add to what Ndaba is saying, we need to be very careful and we need to be vigilant about whose game we're playing.
Yes, thank you.
Whose game are you playing? How on social media with your radical opinions, which I am not against, right? But whose bid are you bidding?
Are you bidding? Yeah.
You know what I mean? You are playing in a game that is designed to suppress you anyway. And with social media, you get this traction and you get an audience and you think you're a figure of authority. And the puppeteer is looking at you like
True.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that we really need to be careful, as we need to tread lightly and carefully, and we need to, even as scholars, I mean, like, I am an avid scholar, like I'm an academic through and through, but there's so much about the academic system that I will look at and be like,
something else, yeah.
You know, and I also, even in my writing, I have to be privy of who I'm talking about and whose game I'm playing in. Ha ke bitso la batho fela, ha ke tlotla ke re morena le a bua inele what ka former prime minister Ntate Mosisi dinele what
Based on what?
Whose narrative am I serving?
Based on
Right? I'm not even getting into like the nitty-gritty of the governance issues and the politics. I'm just saying that Motalo Balantotso is another white man that's gonna be like, yeah, they're exposing each other. You know, like, make them even debari even more by like educating their young people to see that we're using them as puppets, like,
and bringing an NGO.
You know what you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that we need to be very careful, and I believe that you need to dig deep when we're doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have this or that opinion on the growth in the number of traditional healers that are coming out, and fashion, this is my opinion of that. My opinion of that is that there is a collective awakening that's happening, and I believe, but I believe that prior to colonialism, every black person was prone to engaging with their ancestry, to harnessing powers from nature, and people's mothers and whatever, herbalists, all sorts of things, right? And I say all this to say that there is so much, there's a wealth of knowledge and there's a wealth of liberation that we can get from just taking a moment and looking at the past and seeing how our ancestors navigated the past. They were careful in what they were doing, you know, and they were at a disadvantage because this was new to them. A white man was new to them. These concepts were new to them. Democracy, skolo. So it would be our fault not to make use of the tools that the white man has given us to engage critically with what they are giving us, right? They teach you critical thinking in school. So take that critical thinking and apply it to the very things that they're teaching you. Don't apply it to your past or your indigenous knowledge. Don't allow yourself to be that tool for them, because that's what they're doing. So that you can now go and criticize your own people. No, how so that I can use them to criticize you.
Yeah. Garlic!
Okay. And this is why, when people ask me, why are you continuing with school if you have such an issue with these systems? And I'm saying, how am I supposed to deconstruct this system brick by brick if I do
don't
not
know the other side?
If I don't know how it's built or what it's built on. I need to know every single aspect of it. Every aspect.
It's like a Christian. No, I'm trying to learn Lucifer. So I know
that I can know how to fight
Lucifer.
Exactly.
You understand?
Exactly.
I need to know who Lucifer is.
I like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, MissDee, for coming through. Jesus Christ. It's a mad because you tell her.
It's so wild to be called that.
Mahal, thank you for coming. This was a dope conversation. We're still going to have more to come with more guests, and you'll be part of that as well.
I ask?
Yeah, please ask.
That when you do a next episode,
Yeah.
all the people at that ministry that are responsible for building the infrastructure of this museum, call them here.
Yes.
I have some stuff to say to them.
Yes, please. No, that shall be our next task.
I have some stuff to say to them.
So from me, D-Dubs, and Rockview, shout out to Rockview as well for hosting us. Thank you. We'll see you guys on the flip side. Okay. Jesus Christ.
Get it?